Hello, everyone, and good evening back on Zoom. I'm going to imagine all of you saying good evening back to me. My name is Sharon Hayes, and I am an artist and the chair of the Department of Fine Arts at the Weitzman School of Design, formerly known as Penn Design, and when Terry Adkins first started teaching here as the Graduate School of Fine Arts. It's a huge pleasure for me to welcome you to tonight's panel on the legacy of Terry Adkins. Teaching work is complex work. It's hard work. It requires intensive attention and care, as well as the clarity and humility to hold your tongue and recess into the background of a student's process. I was not at Penn when Terry was teaching in our department, but when I arrived in 2015, I felt his presence and his impact in all the circulations of our department, visibly and invisibly. I want to start by thanking those people who make it possible for us to continue to live with and learn from Terry's teaching and his artwork. His wife, Meryl, his children, Titus and Turia, as well as his friends, collaborators, and former students, some of whom are our panelists tonight. It's through your extraordinary brilliance, your love, your commitments to preserving, sharing, and supporting Terry's work that those of us who follow him here at Penn and future audiences and generations can encounter his vital and singular practice. Thanks to these collective labors, Terry's work is being exhibited extensively in the US and beyond, including an amazing show of works on paper that is currently up at the Paula Cooper Gallery in New York City. It is an honor to gather with many of you tonight. The work on campus to honor Terry Adkins' impact on the department, the school, the university, and our communities has also been held by your love and labor, by beautiful works like Charles Hall's memorial sculpture, Acroasis, a galvanized steel and enamel sculpture made and installed in 2015 into the very structural elements of our primary teaching space in what has been known as Morgan Hall and is under renovation right now. Charles's memorial sculpture to Terry hovered over our regular circulations and held space for us, with us, from 2015, when Charles installed it, until it was removed this summer in preparation for the renovation and expansion of that building. Charles is working to gift his work to the Penn Art Collection, and he's working with us in the department to reimagine a new memorial sculpture to Terry to be installed when our new building opens fall of 2025. Led by these important efforts, we at the School of Design are working to honor Terry's legacy in a few other critical ways. When our new building opens in that fall, it will open with a new sculpture lab and an MFA studio named after Terry Adkins. This year, the school initiated a fund in Terry's name, and we're working to actively build that resource into a robust fellowship for future MFA students. Tonight's panel is an incredible node in that work of memory and remembering. This panel is a collaboration between the Department of Fine Arts, the Arthur Ross Gallery, and the Penn Art Collection. And it's my honor to introduce our moderator, Dr. Gwendolyn DuBois Shaw, who will introduce the panelists and lead tonight's discussion. Dr. Gwendolyn DuBois Shaw is the class of 1940 bicentennial term professor in the Department of the History of Art and the inaugural faculty director of the Arthur Ross Gallery at the University of Pennsylvania. Prior to coming to Penn, she served on the faculty at Harvard University, and she was also named the Director of Research, Publications, and Scholarly Programs at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery in 2019. DuBois Shaw is the first woman to hold this senior position at the Portrait Gallery. Dr. Shaw's research focuses on portraiture and representation, examining constructions of race, class, gender, and sexuality in the Americas. She's published extensively, and her book, The Art of Remembering, Essays on African American Art and History, was just published this year by Duke Press, adding to an extensive and expansive bibliography that includes her acclaimed 2004 book, Seeing the Unspeakable, The Art of Kara Walker. In addition to her incredible scholarship, Dr. Shaw is a prolific curator with dozens of major shows, including 30 Americans at the Barnes Foundation, Represent, 200 Years of African American Art in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and Do Tell at the ICA here at the University of Pennsylvania. It is my honor and pleasure to pass tonight's program to my colleague, Gwendolyn DuBois Shaw.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to start out with an apology for my voice. I'm just coming out of a cold, and the cold is it's still lingering. So hopefully I will do less talking and the panelists will do more, since I'm sure that they will sound better than me. It's such a pleasure, though, to be able to bring this group together to speak about the legacy of Terry. It's hard for me to call him Terry Adkins because I just remember him as Terry. He was here when I arrived at Penn in 2005 and was always kind of had a skeptical expression on his face. And whenever I think about him, I just think about the way that he would kind of look back at me a little quizzically. So it's great to be here to talk about Terry, his impact on his colleagues, his students, and Penn. I just want to show a couple of slides of his work for those of you who may be less familiar with his work. In 2002, 2003, Terry mounted an exhibition at the Arthur Ross Gallery called Dark Water, a recital in 4 dominions, Terry Adkins after W.E.B. Du Bois. And you can see here the the logo for the show. The sign for the show had this image of Du Bois in his study. Here's Terry in the show at the gallery with students in the background. My colleague Tukufu Zuberi, who will be joining us. A mirror view of one of Terry's works. And in 2016, Dark Water Revival, after Terry Adkins was mounted at the Arthur Ross Gallery, it brought together a group of his students and collaborators. And this is a view into that show. Works inspired by Terry, pieces done under his direction. And the reception for that exhibition. There's Nsenga, she'll be here tonight. People enjoying the show. So tonight we are joined by a group of panelists. A decade on, Terry's memory is still so powerful for many of us. The phenomenal work that he made, the projects that he engaged with around formidable thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois, who conducted his first research here at the University of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Negro, while he was holding a position here at Penn. As well as the music that Terry brought forth with self-styled groups like Blanche Bruce and the Lone Wolf Recital Corps. All of this continues to amaze and inspire us. So tonight I'm joined by Ernel Martinez. Ernel was born in the small country of Belize and raised in South Central Los Angeles and Detroit. His introduction to art was through the underground world of graffiti. Martinez studied at the Pratt Institute and obtained his BFA from Kutztown University. In 2004, he received his MFA from the University of Pennsylvania. Based out of the Philadelphia area, Martinez explores creative methods to give underserved communities the tools to tell their stories through art making. He uses their stories as a framework to produce artwork based in social practice that engages and builds dialogue, and believes that art enriches communities and is the path to true collaboration. Charles Hall was born in West Philadelphia, raised in Washington, D.C., and graduated from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Prior to obtaining his MFA from the University of Pennsylvania, he worked in advertising as a writer and creative director, making Super Bowl commercials and influencing culture for brands like Nike, Jordan, Adidas, and Reebok. An athlete at heart, a writer by trade, and activist by conscience, his practice explores the architecture of syntax, the spectacle of masculinity, and strategies for community empowerment through drawing, performance, sculpture, video, and installation. He is the founder of Mamie and Weaver's Ultra, a monument to the legacy of his late grandparents, which specializes in the presentation of time-based media performance and community engagement in West Philly. Nsenga Knight was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1981. Earned an MFA from University of Pennsylvania in 2010 and a BA from Howard University. She has exhibited work internationally, including Contemporary Image Collective in Cairo, Egypt, Drawing Center in New York, Project Row Houses in Houston, New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, among others. Knight was an in situ artist fellow at the Queens Museum in 22 to 24 and is a recipient of grants from the Pollock Krasner Foundation, the Foundation for Contemporary Art, Leeway Foundation, Brooklyn Arts Council. She was an artist in residence at Brick Workspace in Brooklyn in 2019 and the Film Video Arts Center in New York in 2005, among others. She lives and works in New York. Her current solo exhibition, which you should go see because it's up until January 19, 2025, is on view at the Queens Museum. Dr. Tukufu Zuberi is the Lazary Family Professor of Race Relations and Professor of Sociology and Africana Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Somebody told me that he's chairing Africana Studies right now, so he's got a lot on his plate. Dr. Zuberi's vision is dedicated to education as a professor, a documentary maker, television host, and museum curator. He is the author of 4 books and has written more than 70 scholarly articles and edited or co-edited 8 volumes. From 2003 to 2014, Zuberi was a host of the hit public broadcasting system series History Detectives. The History Detectives regularly presented the social history of American culture to the public. And joining us is Guthrie P. Ramsey. Guy Ramsey is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is a music historian, a pianist, composer, and the Edmund J. and Louise W. Kahn Term Professor Emeritus, which means he got to retire, which I'm a little jealous of, music at the University of Pennsylvania. A widely published writer, he's the author of numerous books and articles.
Professor Shaw, in the spirit of Terry Adkins, I'm going to say, please, that's enough of my bio.
Okay, well, can I just say that Dr. Guy's musicology lives on. And if you have an opportunity to go see musicology, you should. All right, I'll stop there. I wanted to start with Guy and with Tukufu to talk just a little bit. Tukufu, if you put your camera on, to talk just a little bit about what it was like to have Terry as a colleague, because as I said at the beginning, I found Terry very intimidating. And I always thought he was judging everything that came out of my mouth and every artist that I name checked, and all of that. But I know that you both had a longer relationship with him than I did, because you were both here when I got here, and had many different interactions with him. So I'm just curious about what he was like as a colleague, and what was really distinctive about what he brought to the community, particularly Africana studies, which we were all involved in, at Penn. What was the specialness of Terry?
Terry was a very powerful person. I met him in 2002 when he was organizing this exhibition, Dark Water. He was looking for a sociologist to be involved, and so he had called over to the sociology department and asked for my colleague Elijah Anderson. Now, and when Eli heard what he wanted to do, which was put him in a cage and have him read some words from DuBois, he kindly declined the offer. And so he went to the younger guy, who was me at the time, and asked if I would be interested in doing that. And we had a long conversation about DuBois. And I went over to his studio, and he pulled out an original copy of the Philadelphia Negro, an original copy of Dark Wood. He had a whole shelf of DuBois's books that he had bought. And we began a long conversation that continued until my last conversation with him in 2014. And that conversation was about DuBois. It was about scholarship, and it was about, how we could engage in providing a vision of DuBois. And he was always fascinated by DuBois's visual imagination. DuBois had curated a lot of exhibitions during his life, beginning with the Paris exhibition, and so he was really inspired by that. And for this show, he asked me to participate, and he took credit for my being on the History Detectives, because he asked me to go in that cage that's in the background of the first image that you showed, and to read a speech from the yes, this cage right here. So you can imagine me standing up inside of there, you know, and I had a copy of the letter that he read, which was the first place that he had expressed the idea that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. And I read the speech, and while I was reading the speech, you know, people just kind of gathered around and listened to it. I think this is the photo at the later exhibit, the legacy exhibit. But it was, yes, you
Yeah,
see
in
behind
the
me right
background
there.
there.
Yes, I'm not in the cage now, but then I was in the cage and reading from it. And on this side, you can't see kind of like the bars, but you know, all of that was part of the way that Terry was imagining it. And we, you know, and I had the pleasure of working with Terry around other projects about Du Bois in 2012 when we got Du Bois an honorary degree, honorary professorship of sociology and Africana studies at the University of Penn, of which, you know, Guthrie, Professor Ramsey and Professor Shaw participated in. We came together to just make the statement that he wasn't given a professorship when he was working at Penn. He was kind of dismissed in the administrative process, although they did give him a lectureship. Well, we came back, and for the first time ever, the University of Pennsylvania gave him an honorary professorship, and that was a professorship of sociology and Africana studies. So, and part of that project was also Terry, and he did an exhibit that
Yeah,
of
that whole
work,
print series that he
that
put
whole
together.
print series,
Mhm.
and it now lines the walls of the Center for Africana Studies. And one of the things we did in that was an imaginary interview between I was the imaginary Du Bois, and Terry asked me questions and I answered those questions. We had one live run through that at the Du Bois house here on the Penn campus back in 2012. So, you know, and I had a lot of conversations about Terry. I mean, the last conversation we had, I was looking at the Skype conversation. I was in Brazil and he was here, and we were like, we're gonna sit down and we got to do something else now because it's been a while. This was a couple of years later, and we need to figure out how we're going to do something else. And that meant go raise money to help Terry do this project, and he's going to put me in it some kind of way. I just was praying he wasn't going to put me in a cage again. Then I arrived back, and I got a call from Ramsey, and there you go. So I like to consider him as a good friend of mine. Sometimes we fought very intensely, but I think that was part of his process. And, you know, and it was a beautiful thing. We would come back and make up on the rebound, but, you know, and sit down and drink something cold with ice in
Yeah.
it.
And you, Guy?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that, Professor Zuberi. I know that you miss your friend, and because of his life force and his interest. And I would say, yes, I was envious of you and Terry's relationship. And I will say, yes, uh, Professor Shaw, Terry could be intimidating, or rather, he tried to be. It never worked with me, although I recognized him being, you know, smarter than me. But I also found him to be extremely funny and extremely interesting. and a compelling, truly multi-hyphenate, artist and scholar. I have so many thoughts about Terry. And since I haven't been a professor for 3 years, I may sound a little awkward in the kinds of things that I'd like to talk about. But I would say that what I knew about Terry is, as I say, funny and just a compelling, interesting person. But he was a very honest person too. He was an honest artist that if he didn't understand something that you had said or something you had written or something that you had made, he was going to question you. He was going to ask about it. I can't say I always cared for his bedside manner, but he definitely knew how to get to the point. Which who can't appreciate someone who wouldn't waste your time with platitudes and dishonesty, and someone who would be willing to engage you? I mean, I think that's how he made friends. He'd get in there and get a jab in or get something in to let you know that he actually is seriously considering what you were talking about and what you had made or had written. The funny thing is, I learned a lot more about Terry after he passed.
Mm.
Our buildings, although our buildings were next to each other, his studio was next to my office in the music department. So we would run into each other occasionally on the way to the offices. And I have to say, Terry always dressed like a work of art, by the way.
He did. He had a very distinctive style.
Yes, he looked like he was going to a recital, his exhibition thing. He was studied in how he wanted to be seen, it seems to me. He curated that look. He really took a lot of time to move through the world as something to be looked upon. That's the way I look at it. And I would always compliment him too. He, first of all, say that again. What did you say?
No, I was gonna say, not only that, sometimes Terry would see me walking down the street and he was like, man, what's that you got on? Dude,
Yeah.
let me tell you, go over here and you go in there. They got a thing for you. And where was the place he was talking about go in? It could be in Paris, it could be in London, it could be in New York, but the cat was definitely cultivating and curating. I like that he was curating how he looked. From the rings on his finger to the shoes on his feet, the brother was not just getting up, putting it on.
Well, once again, Zuberi, I have to say that he never asked where I got what I had on. So, hey, listen, so you win again.
Yeah, but look, again, he used to tell me, stop laughing so much on TV, man. Quit showing your teeth.
And that's exactly what
Be a
I'm
little
talking
more
about.
serious.
Other people would think that, but Terry, and I imagine that was part of his pedagogical practice. I'm sure his former students will be able to straighten us out on that, is that you never had to wonder what he was truly thinking. I have to say, I want to just address two last things. First of all, as I say, I learned more about Terry's art and impact after he passed. And one of the reasons that is that after he passed, there was an upsurge, it seems to me, in the interest in that work that had already been there. So like many artists who are not, kind of in the mainstream, let's say, or I don't even know how to put it more directly, but oftentimes minority artists and women artists get this insane amount of interest in their work, or the proper amount of interest in their work after they pass. And some of the shows some of the exhibitions that occurred after Terry passed, I would walk through them and say, I really wish he could have experienced this,
Yeah.
you know, in his lifetime, because he was a truly prolific, original, varied and adventurous artist, both in the sound world and in the visual world, and commenting on it. And the last thing I'll say is that once Terry passed, I began to get former students of his in my classes, signing up for my classes, the histories of jazz or the histories of Black music courses, because that was part of why they wanted to study with Terry, is that he was well versed in music history and in musicians and in art history and in artists, and they could get all of that rolled up into one. And so when he was no longer there, you're in the middle of the program, what are you going to do? So I had several students who took even undergraduate courses with me, although they were in the MFA program, because they felt that there was something that I was teaching that could somehow fill that void. And so therefore, I got to start meeting these students and talking to them about Terry and his practice and his influence and things like that. So yeah, those are the things that I would like to comment on.
Mm-hmm. No,
Can I respond to one thing he said?
Uh-huh.
The first thing he just said right now. Can I say something?
Please.
So we used to Skype because I travel a lot. We used to Skype a lot, Terry and I, when I was traveling. And one of the things he called me in 2014, and he said, "Tukufu, man, they found me." I mean, it's a very interesting moment, because what you're talking about is the exhibit, but he was like, they found me and they found my work. I can't even make enough fast enough now. I got to get back home and get to work. I mean, he really felt at that moment that there was a recognition of the work that he had done and the contribution that he was making. And it was really a beautiful thing. It was really a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you see that moment and it's extending in his life. And now we know he's legendary now.
I didn't comment on the formal practice that I saw in Terry's work. He has commented on the way that his music is informed by the visual, and the visual was informed by his music. I am struck by 2 points when I look at his sculptures, for instance. They often deal with a serialization of a pattern that once set up could be varied across works. That's a very musical approach to material culture. And so I wanted to comment on that even I don't know if he described it in that way, but I certainly see that conversation going on in Terry's sculptures and in musical practice.
No. Yeah, the year that he passed was the same year when he was in the Whitney Biennial, which Anthony Elms helped to curate, and Anthony was curator at ICA at Penn, and I think that was a real pivotal moment, and it was just heartbreaking going to see the biennial and see the big drum stack, I think, and cymbals that were in there, and just thinking that this was the moment when it was all kind of, hitting the national scene. And it was just a few months too late for him to be there. So it was very, very, very challenging. So I want to go to Ernel and Charles and Nsenga to bring you into this conversation. If you could turn your cameras on. So colleagues, faculty, we have one experience. We're Skyping on the regular and all of that with our colleagues. But what was it like to have Terry as a professor? If he intimidated me, like, what was it like being his student? And Ernel, I think that you were the earliest of these three, yeah?
Yeah, I'm just the oldest, or
The oldest? Oh, okay. Well,
but it's funny, having these conversations about Terry. It just stirred all these emotions in me, and I woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning, and this word jumped out at me. This phrase, "artist as truth teller," and Terry was a profound truth teller. And you never had to worry about what he was saying behind your back, because he would tell it to you directly to your face. And
no qualms, huh? No
right.
problem.
I've had so many wonderful moments with Terry, and not so wonderful, but they were always honest. And he was really a stand-up person. It's funny how everyone's telling all these stories. And although I was there for 2 years, Terry and I really built a relationship after graduate school. And while I was there, I didn't have a choice. Terry said, "Man, you're gonna take my sculpture seminar, right?" First, he posed the question, but it was more of a pronouncement that, "Yeah, you're gonna take my class." And sure enough, I took his class for 2 semesters, and my world was just completely broadened and opened up. And one of the things about Terry as a professor is that he was not only direct with you, he also make you laugh. And there's this warmth about Terry that he sort of carried himself. There was a dignity and everything else, but there was a warmth and sort of a humorous side of Terry. And Terry would on a daily basis make fun of me. For one reason or another. He teased me about my hair, and I would call him Blackula, and because he'd walk around in these elaborate outfits, and so we had this great banter, and but as a student, I was there when Terry's career was taking off, and we'd have these really sort of personal conversations about other artists that he would see, younger artists at the time, sort of really recognized in the art world, and I could sense there was some frustration behind that reality, and so we'd have these sort of frank conversations about that and what it meant for him, and and I think initially he probably felt that he wasn't getting those opportunities while I was there. But that quickly started to change, as you guys all mentioned before, Dr. Zuberi and Dr. Ramsey, that, sort of towards the end of his life, his career took off like a rocket. And when he passed, it even exploded to another level. So, just being around that to witness that happen was amazing and really inspiring. I was involved with a handful of collaborations with Terry through the Lone Wolf Recital Corps as a student at Pageant Gallery. That was sort of one of the first actual performances that I ever did. And, that sort of led to a few other collaborations, the Black Beethoven and a couple others. And, each one of them was really profound, and sort of life-changing for me. One of the things Terry said many years ago was, while we're doing the photo shoot for the Black Beethoven, was that he said, "Man, I'm about to make you famous." And I didn't know what he meant by that, So, after the photo shoot and all the, magic that Terry did with his work, he created this sort of beautiful piece of my face and Beethoven's face sort of morphing into each other, which is really profound and beautiful. And so, Terry's work, still lingers, inspires artists to this day, which is pretty amazing. And just to be a part of that and just witnessing that has been great.
Yeah. Nsenga?
Yeah, I guess I would think of Terry as like artist or professor as mentor, right? Because for me, I thought his his mentorship and his critique and just watching him as an artist out in the world was kind of the most profound and powerful thing, because I met Terry before going to UPenn. I came to UPenn in large part because he was there. I had met one of his previous students at the time, who I think Ernel is good friends with, Demetrius Oliver. Demetrius was doing a residency at the Studio Museum, and I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York, so I met him there, and he was telling about this professor he had, this amazing, professor that he had at UPenn, and like about their program. And I was like, "Oh, who that?" I was like, "Who's this person?" And so I immediately, probably like that week, like called the university to speak to Terry. And Terry was like, it's so funny because I don't know. He was like, "Who?" I'm like, "Yeah, I heard about you, Terry Adkins. Yeah, Demetrius said that you're like really amazing." I'm like, anyway, and so Jamal Cyrus, who's another artist, many of us know, he was a student at UPenn at the time. So I kind of met Terry and became a student through this sort of chain of other artists who he had mentored and who loved him and who were transformed by him. And, you know, Demetrius, he spoke about how he came in as a certain kind of artist and left as a different kind of artist, you know? And so, yeah, I think as a teacher, my studio was on, so Terry had 2 studios apparently at UPenn. He had one in the During building and he had one in the main building. And so my studio was like right next to his studio. There's like one studio between us. So he was like at the end of the hall and like there was one studio and I was right there. So I saw him all the time. And like Terry would go in my studio when I was not in my studio because there were no doors and like look at what I'm doing, leave a note. They're like, this is horrible. Like, stop that. You know, this is good. Keep going. So it was like that constant sort of mentorship and feedback. I took 2 of Terry's classes, but it wasn't nearly as kind of like profound as like him, just his example, just being around him, having conversations with him, going to his shows while I was a student. You know, we would come to New York when he was doing something. He was doing something at PS1, I think Hoodoo, it was the new Neo Hoodoo show. And I was filming like his performance there. Or like before he came to Penn, he was something at Brick in Brooklyn, and just sort of, you know, just going kind of that back and forth thing of like, oh, you know, student at UPenn, also his studio is there, and he's an artist, and he's doing these interesting things, and like, he's very, you know, like I said, like everybody has said, he'll give you feedback, you know, he will give you feedback. So, and that kind of seeing him out in the world as an artist, in his work and getting to know his work as a student, as seeing it in an exhibition, seeing what he was thinking about, and also his involvement, you know, in my own studio practice of like giving me feedback, having conversations, you know, was just really, yeah, profound. I think of him as you know, a mentor, and even, you know, like, you know, Ernel, like I had like this emotional moment yesterday just thinking about this whole thing, and I was like, wow, I miss that. Like, I don't feel like I have somebody like that right now. Like, I miss that. Somebody who's so like, and realizing that their critique, even their harsh critique, you know, like, cause he would make you laugh, but he would make you cry too. Like, he'll make you cry too. And so it's like, if you can survive that, you know, and be like, you know what, yeah, he's crazy, he's boisterous and all this stuff, you know, crazy uncle, you know, like, you know, just think of it as a family member like that, you know, then you can, you know, get the real benefit of being in relationship with him as a mentor, as a student, as, you know, like getting the real beauty and benefit of him being in our lives.
And Charles, was Terry collaborator or mentor? What was your relationship like with him?
Well, first, I'd just like to say that I come to this conversation with the spirit of Wilma Wilson, James Morrell, Ava Hassinger, Evan Nabrit, Sam Matt, Sarah Tatora, Tia Simone Gardner, Reza Mizrahi, and so many other classmates from 2015 and 2014 and 2016 who really not only held me, but participated in the holding of each other through his loss. And, you know, it's, I find it difficult even after even after all these years to revisit those memories. And while the recollection of him as a friend and a mentor and a professor brings incredible joy and warmth, it also brings a certain weight. I'd like to circle back to some of the commentary early on and that Professor Ramsey talked about, you know, the migration and the how people sought him out. It wasn't just it wasn't just because of how he taught music, but Terry served as a father figure to so many students that we were looking for that spiritual, intellectual rigor that exists in people like Professor Ramsey and Professor Zuberi. So that was crucial. And the beautiful thing about Professor Ramsey is that he made room for us and really opened his arms and said, "Come on in." I think the other note that I want to share about the way Terry dressed, you would see him in something sometimes that looked so good that you would ask him about it as if it was new, and he would reply that, as I don't know if this is a Miles Davis quote or a Thelonious Monk quote, but he would reply, "Nah, this ain't new. You know, like Monk says, I don't wear my new shit." You know, and I have a story once because I knew Terry before I came to Penn one day, driving around New York City, and I ran into him. I saw him on Canal Street, bunch of bags and dressed up, you know, in a long, kind of flowing type of gown, and beeped at him and, you know, offered him a ride home. He told me the story. I think he was coming back from a trip to Cairo, and how they that when he went to check in for the flight, how they thought he was a priest and addressed him as Monsignor and asked him if he, you know, and offered to move him up to first class. So Terry's spiritual presence was always a fashion icon, but his style also had other perks, to it. I think that you know, as a professor, what I probably enjoyed the most about Terry was that his classes really didn't start till about 1 in.the morning. You know, because Terry would roam the halls and the studios and the exhibition spaces 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And he would know people were in the studios and he would know people were working. And those were the times when he would come and give you, you know, the critique that helped you fix something where you were stuck, or that, you know, inspired you in such a way it changed, you know, the next move that you were going to make. And I think the other thing that has been incredible for me is that through his spirits and through his, you know, other students, in his absence, they have become, guiding lights, like Ernel and Nsenga and Tia Simone Gardner and other people. There is an extended family that exists through scholarship with Terry that is passed on. And one of the beautiful things about coming through Penn is that you can pass that on to other people like Glenn Sonny Wooden and like David L. Johnson, who came after me, but I've had a chance to meet because of the strength of the program and the relationships that kind of indirectly exists because of Terry.
Thank you, Charles. So I saw that Josh Mosley from the department had his hand up. Sonia, yeah, Josh, can you turn your mic on?
Hi, I'm watching, but I didn't have my hand up, but it's nice to see everybody.
But
I might have hit it on accident. Oh, I did hit it.
yeah, the little hands up, but that's okay, Josh.
Yeah.
Joshua.
It's good to see you, my friend. So, the thing that really impresses me in this conversation about Terry is that research-based practice and the legacy of that research-based practice. And part of what Tukufu was saying about all the work that Terry did on W.E.B. Du Bois and all of the projects that he was working on, what Ernel brought up about Black Beethoven, and really thinking about the African presence throughout history, across time, across space. Right. And so I'm be really interested to hear from the three of you about how that approach to art making, how the kind of conceptual research-based practice approach that I think is very distinctive of the MFA program at Penn is one of the things that I think it really distinguishes it from some other programs, but how that lives through your work and reflects what Terry gave to you.
Yeah.
You want to start her now?
Sure, absolutely. It's funny how I've sort of come full circle, and I think that comes originally from sort of Terry's experience at Fisk, that he brought that along with him to Penn, right? Mm-hmm. And my time there not only sort of broadened my world in just so many different ways, but to really think about history and the relevance of it today. And for the last 20 plus years or 20 years or so, all the collaborations that I've done are usually sort of focused on sort of telling stories, but then doing like these sort of deep dives in the history of the stories, and then sort of representing or recontextualizing those stories in a new way, either it be it through collaboration, and or performances or what have you, right? These interventions that I would do throughout these performances with Keir Johnston, who's a co-founder of Amber Design, with myself and a few other artists. And it's always about these experiences that we're sharing with each other. And for me as a creator, the time with Terry was really about sort of connecting with other people, and sort of witnessing how Terry collaborated with Jamaluddin Tookoomba and other musicians and artists and creators in different ways. And that energy, I think it still lives today, and again, the last 20 years, I've sort of expressed myself through these different methods that Terry sort of shared with me, and given people who might not have been able to get into Penn or experience that directly with Terry, that they're getting a little bit of that experience sort of passed along. Mm-hmm. And and I sort of cherish that, and so I'm constantly inspired by the work that Terry did, without trying to copy what he did, but just at the core of what he did. And I really be remiss, and it's sort of not related, but I want to bring this up just for the sake of this conversation, that the one thing that really jumped out about Terry more than anything else was his laughter. You know, you'd walk the hallways and you could hear Terry laughing from across the building in Morgan. You know, and that booming laugh was so powerful. You know, it sort of just drew people to Terry. So, you know, that's what I'm going to miss most about Terry is his laugh. You know, beyond everything else, beyond the academics, beyond the art, beyond friendship, it was just laugh and his warmth.
Yeah. And Nsenga, before we went live tonight, you were talking about work that you were doing in Cairo and how it was connected to things that you had discussed with Terry.
Yeah, I think Tukufu was talking about one of the pieces Terry did in his Dark Water exhibition that it was a reading of a DuBois letter, and Tukufu read it, and then I was just really fascinated by that because I was like, oh, I did this project. X Speaks. It's a project I've iterated many times. The most recent iteration of it was in Cairo, where I was using Malcolm X's final speeches. And in Cairo, it was a letter. It was actually a letter that he wrote that he wanted to deliver as a speech, but didn't have the opportunity to, just because he was a delegate to this conference. He wasn't like, he didn't have the same position as a head of state, but nonetheless. And even that project, I collaborated with Taji Rofdal, who I think is in the audience here, who was one of Terry's collaborators in the Lone Wolf recital trio, I actually met Taji through Terry's memorial, you know, like, and anyway, it was just kind of when it was only once I was deep in the project in a certain way that I realized this thing that I was doing that Terry would do. You know, we mentioned this thing before we started. Blanche Bruce, he was this sort of character, but he's a real person. He was a real person who was part of the recital corp, right? And but he was somebody who different people could embody this person. You know, Blanche Bruce might just sit there on the stage, not do anything, but somebody else different person might be, or he might just be walking. You know, he was a presence, and I just think about that and like this sort of variable that he was using within this building of a performance work, but also in collaboration with different people who could embody and have this kind of experience. And I think also when I think about, you know, his fascination or commitment to exploring W.E.B. Du Bois in his work, I feel like I have that same kind of commitment with like Malcolm X. He comes in different projects, you know, like over the span of, you know, whatever 15 plus, you know, years of me being an artist. Not in every project, but he shows up, you know, just somebody who constantly shows up. And yeah, just I think in so many ways, just having an artist, you know, Terry's work was definitely conceptual work. It was interdisciplinary work, and which always kind of pushed us to have this sort of deeper engagement with history, with you know, even I'm sorry, just this is like a little point that was made between Tukufu and Guy Ramsey. You know, this, and it was mentioned before about Terry, kind of his afterlife, you know, in a sense of like getting this certain type of acknowledgement. And I think there was a point where I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of sad. Like, you know, in a sense, like the artists after they died, then like, you know, they have this certain other level. But then I thought to myself, no, not really, because Terry was a person who believed in afterlife. He was somebody who was very committed to afterlife, legacy. He, you know, in his work, he kind of resurrected people, you know, give W.E.B. Du Bois a degree, a faculty position. Like, he was committed to that. He believed that the afterlife, that there was an extension of somebody's life that could just keep going after they died. So this is what's happening with him. It's you know, and so then because of that too, that I don't feel like there's a loss. I think it should grow. You know what I'm saying? Like, we wouldn't want it to decline. So, you know, I think he believed in that, and that there's something beautiful and powerful to that extension of his presence and of his work.
Yeah. And Charles, if you're still there, um, when you were speaking the names of all of those students, of Terry, some of whom I know and had in classes, it really reminded me of the breadth of that impact, right? And as faculty, we have students out there in the world, and some of them we feel very close to, and some of them feel very close to us, and sometimes it's mutual. Sometimes it's mutual. And I think with Terry, there really was a lot of that mutuality. And so, I'm curious with your practice, with your current practice, especially thinking about the space in West Philly that you're working with now, that recalls the impact of your own family, as part of that, the work that you're doing. How does all of this weave together with Terry's legacy and the kind of work that he did?
Well, I think we've heard other people touch on it throughout the evening, and probably the key to that is this word collaboration. He believed deeply in it. He practiced it. He believed in exchange of knowledge with other people and being in dialogue with other people. He also was really good about pointing you in the direction to learn from different teachers. I think about the impact that Ken Plum has had on me. I think about the impact that Matt Friedman has had on me. I think about the impact that Joshua Mosley has had on me, as well as so many other professors at Penn. But the manifestation or the creation of Mamie and Weaver's Ultra came from an assignment in Ken Lum's class. And as I started to think about it and started to clear the space, I remember meeting Ernel after a performance one day for Terry's sonic measures class after he had passed. And through my, through that relationship with Ernel stopped by one day, and I, just in telling him, what I was thinking, like Ernel could see it. And in seeing it, he believed in it, and the same happened with Tia Simone Gardner. And so this idea of collaborating with other artists, everything that has happened in that space has been because of other Penn MFA students and graduates, all the work that has been shown there, with the exception of, a few people have all come through the program. And what's been, I guess, remarkable about, this, I don't want to call it a family, because, some people, it's not like these people always call you on your birthday or something like that. But there is a certain kinship that seems to exist, of people that come to that program, and people are willing to support, to collaborate, and to help bring something to life. And in that has also come in an introduction to other people, to people who graduated years before me. And recently it's been, an introduction into students who came after. So there's I think the thing that the one word that maybe I haven't heard today that was, at least I always found was true of Terry, is that there was a generosity of spirit, a generosity of rigor. Like he, yes, he was going to debate you, but he was also willing to give direction, point you in, towards something. He was someone who was willing to share his resources. If you were a student in his class, you were reading things that maybe other people, weren't reading. So I think that it's about, I think to have been in touch with Terry, that you walk away with a certain belief and need to collaborate with others, and you have you have to have a spirit of generosity. You have to give. He was not one to, at least my experience and how I've seen and what I've heard from others, he was not one to exclude. He was I always thought he was generous in heart, and generous in his rigor.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to open it up to questions or comments, thoughts from folks who are in the audience on the attendees list, because I see a lot of familiar names, some of whom we've talked a little bit about, have been mentioned tonight. Alexis Johnson, I see Jackie Tileston, James Sprang, Joshua, of course, Matt Neff, and others. If folks have questions or comments, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand, and I think Sonia would probably make you live. So Taj Rauf Nahi. Sonia, can you help Taj into there? Great. Taji.
Good day, peace. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All I have to say, I could say a lot. It could be a whole nother hour. However, this is so dynamic that y'all doing this. The introduction, everything that everybody said, I have this part of my practice I call exclamation point. And exclamation point is my being in conversation with other people's work. I got that from Terry. And what y'all doing is an exclamation point. The project that I heard that y'all gonna name a facility after Terry or a program after Terry, that's exclamation point. And I'll tell you this, from my relationship with Terry, he knew this was coming. He knew this was coming. And to Nsenga's point about the afterlife, he knew this was coming. He knows this is happening right now. And I tell you, I have made it a point in my journey and working with Terry, being a friend of Terry's, because I was not a quote unquote colleague. I actually was a dealer who sold Terry's work, and that's how we met. Terry came into my gallery in 2001, and I was on 3rd Street. Terry comes in, and it was like we immediately hit it off, because he was like, who is this guy with this stuff here, this abstract art and fine furnishings, and I'm the owner. You're the owner. Wait a minute, you're the owner? And I would get that all the time. Terry was like, he embraced it. And in our journey together over the years, to see his students, I mean, he would talk to me about his students all the time. He was like, Daddy, I got these great students. I can't wait to see what they do. Everything y'all said, Terry knows it already. He was a true visionary. And I know y'all already know this, but I'm gonna stop here because, like I said, I could talk for a whole hour. All right, peace.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ernel, did you want to jump in before?
No, thank you, Taji. For, I was there when Taji and Terry would exchange artwork or for clothing or for furniture, because Terry had this amazing little shop over there on 3rd Street, and I would go with Terry to go over there and pick up some stuff. And Terry, the banter was always great around Terry, and so yeah, it's just heartwarming to hear Taji talk about that and how people are sharing tonight. But yeah, this has been great for me.
Other questions, comments, testimony? Tukufu, Guy, do you want to come back on screen? Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear his students talk. Terry always talked about you all. It was just he would be full of himself talking about the clarity of the, Terry, he's the up and the down, but he would be clearly talking about his legacy out there. And it's beautiful to hear you all. I agree. Terry, one thing Terry was clear about is that, yes, this moment will arrive and others will arrive. And I think he knew it. And I think those moments of his afterlife, he saw it in his life and he was experiencing it in his later days. I mean, and that was, he was really very happy when I spoke with him in those later days, and he really had a lot of positive energy when we talked about where he was going to go and what he was going to do. So, sometimes I would go to his studio, and he had a couple of studios. He had one really giant studio, and then he had the place in New York, and he'd bring me in there, and he was always giving me every story of every piece, and that would take a long time. So, but it would just be a beautiful kind of thing, and usually I would be taking some piece out of there, and if you notice, Terry, he wasn't giving me that piece. I'd be taking some piece out of there, or taking a book out of there or something out of there, and we would engage in that kind of beautiful exchange. And it was really a special. I hold those pieces very very high and very special. But I think one thing is that Terry really thought internationally. I mean, this was we used to really have these wonderful conversations because I was traveling a lot. Cherry's traveling a lot. At that moment, I was doing a lot of work in Africa and had just started branching off to Latin America. And Terry was going to Alaska and working on these projects, that whole Beethoven project. I remember that we was sitting in that studio down there on I think it was, what's the street close?
Yeah, it was Pageant Gallery on 50
Yeah. And that was crazy. I'm not crazy, but it was just like, you'd sit there and Terry would be like, look, man, I told you. And I was like, who is that, man? He's like, no, man, this is the dude. And I say, and so, he was that kind of dude. And some of it would not, it just wasn't frivolous. He actually studied Beethoven a lot to get to that point. And the imagination and the imagery and all of the stories about who Beethoven was and how he went through these changes. And then there was all the stuff he did on John Brown. I mean, he really got into John Brown. I remember we sat a long time and talked about DuBois's book on John Brown, which of course he had an original first edition of the Brown book, and we sat there and pushed it a little bit ahead so it wouldn't get moisture from our ice in our glasses. And we just talked through like John Brown and how John Brown, the whole story about when John Brown went to Frederick Douglass' house. Frederick Douglass was like, no, I'm not going with you, but his staff went with him. So, you know, I mean, he was a very, very much an intellectual as well as just a creative soul, and his intellectual side was very creative as well. But it was always extremely informed. So I used to have these wonderful conversations. I remember I was teaching a course on DuBois's works once, and I'd leave the course. It lasted a long time into the night, and you know, and Terry would be like, "Stop on over, because I'm still up here." I was like, "You had Penn more than me, man. We need to get you out of Penn, you know." That you be traveling
Well,
back.
and he was living on campus too
I
at
know
the
he
Boys
was.
College House. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For a period of time, he was
yeah.
doing college, the Boy House thing.
And his
So,
office. He had a little cotton in his office in Durham as
yes,
well.
he
So he
did.
was crashing
Yes,
at times.
yes, he did. Yes, he did.
The last thing I would say about the generosity piece is that Terry's students have gifted me the most beautiful pieces of work as a thank you. PhD students in my field, they'll give you a dissertation, but to get us a piece of art that you'll treasure forever is just amazing, and they must have learned from the best.
Samuel, did you have a comment or a question? No? Okay. Sharon?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you all of you, but it's coming up now, Professor Zuberi, as you're talking about the studios and just what it was like to be with the stuff of Terry's work, like the stuff in kind of becoming work. I've heard from some of the folks in our facilities I've heard stories of Terry's studio, and just wondering from you all as students, yeah, if you can talk a little bit about it. You've touched on it, but being in the space of his making or his material, like his work with and research through materials is so exact also.
One of you want to jump in, Nsenga?
Well, Terry, like, yeah, I'm curious now how many studios Terry had because because I'm like, I know he had the one in Durham. I know he had the one in the Main Fine Arts Building. Apparently, he had also one in New York. Were there other studios? That's one question. But then I'll say also, it's interesting because Terry also made a lot of work on Penn's campus, like using Penn's facilities. So like the printmaking shop, I remember some of the books that he was making. He made some, I guess they were like limited edition books.
Did he do that at Common Press?
Is that what it's called now? Yeah, I guess that's what I
Oh,
guess
Matt, I just saw Matt's hand go up. Did you want to add to that?
She said sure.
There he is. Hey, Matt.
Oh, hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. It's so great to hear from everyone. It's been like kind of an emotional roller coaster this this hour. But yeah, just I was just sort of, as people were talking about it, I was just thinking about the print shop and printing with Terry. So I worked with Terry on prints from about 2005 until we were still working on prints when he passed away. And Morgan was also a storage unit for him. I don't, a lot of people probably know about the storage. The amount of storage that Terry had on campus is it's insane. Like we're still fine. I mean, it's insane. But as we would print, like he would also just have things everywhere. So every closet in Morgan was full of Terry's things becoming. And that process of things becoming had left I mean, it's really changed my life working with him for that time, because I was a student of his as well. I graduated from the program in 2005. But as a student, you know, he didn't really, you know, he would always like super hard on me about my work, so hard on me. And the printing does the same thing, you know, and I would get calls at 2 in the morning, being like, you better come over now. We got to do this now. So I was,
2 in the morning?
I mean, people know this. Like I mean, other people probably on the panel can attest, but I was on call basically. But it was amazing. I mean, really, I still, and a lot's been said that I would also echo that it's influenced my teaching. It's influenced the way I think about my work and the way I, you know, the way I work with students, the way I think about a practice as an artist is so much broader because of Terry, really. So I can talk too, like Taji, I could talk forever, so I'll stop.
Thank you. Oh,
I was going to say, I think that's really something also very beautiful about Terry's practice is that because Terry would repurpose things a lot, so he might have made one artwork and it was one thing, and then he took that apart and took part of it to make another artwork, and so on and so forth. And so, you know, I think the thing about Terry and being his student and seeing his work is that he was very committed to his creative process, like to creativity, to like and extending that to others. Like Tukufu spoke about how Terry kind of involved him in his art project, and then they had more collaborations, you know, and so it extended. He's a, you know, him as a non-artist became somewhat of an artist too, you know, like and so you start to, even now when you go and see Terry's works in different like exhibitions, you know, there's parts that may have been something else, and it becomes a very interesting sort of puzzle in a sense, you know, because yeah, kind of an interesting puzzle. And but yeah, but the commitment was not to like if he could sell it or if it could be neatly defined or anything like that. It was like it being this thing and then it could be something else.
yeah. It just keeps rolling forward. Great. So other thoughts? Taji? Oh,
I did want to say something. I mean, it's
yeah,
really
please.
how Terry would be really engaged in the work. When he was doing the Philadelphia Negro Reconsidered, he would call me to come and see what Matt and those folks had done. And we'd be like, you got to come down here and see this. And you go read this, make sure everything's correct. And, you know, and correct ain't necessarily just the kind of correct straight on. It was kind of a creative correct. And it was a beautiful thing to engage in. And he'd be calling me. I'd be like, man, be calling me all late at night, dude. And he'd be like, I mean, come on down here for a minute. You don't even live that far. And those guys would be there very, very late working it up. And so, you know, that's just as a kind of testament to his practice and how, you know, he was there. Like you said, he had that cot in his office, and he would be in there all the time. I mean, it may be that I was around the campus a lot, but we would connect for dinner or connect for a drink after dinner or stuff like that. He's a cool cat. He's a real cool cat.
The one thing I want to just take a second to acknowledge is just like how much Terry loved his family and how much he loved his son Titus and Taria and you know,
yes.
Terry mentored me in all kind of ways, but sort of being a parent was one of the great ways that Terry mentored me. And you know, I remember seeing Dr. Tukufu and his child many years ago when they were little. They're probably all grown now, and you know, and that love, and you just sort of see how Terry would interact with Titus. He would bring him on campus, and just that love that he would show his child. And you know, me having a kid that's college age today, you know, you just sort of see that generational impact that he had on being a father. And you know, he always had this great way that he was bigger. His aura was bigger than who the physical human being was. Oh, he was regular size, but he was a much bigger person. And when he walked into the room, he just took up so much space, you know. And just to bear witness to that was always great for me.
So any final thoughts from our panelists? Charles, do you want to jump in again?
Nah, I think, I'm just grateful to have had him in my life and to have been touched by him and Merle and Titus and Turia, and all the students, friends, colleagues that I get to engage with now because of him.
Nsenga?
Yeah, I guess I just also want to, I saw Alexis in the group, but I also want to give a big shout out to Terry's widow, Ernel, because I remember when we were students, he was like, everybody likes Morel, like everybody likes his wife, and so this is kind of,
Merle.
Say it again?
Merle.
Yes, and so her sort of help in carrying his legacy, the state of Terry Adkins. I mean, because I know that must be a lot to the work is all over the place and but that kind of care so that we can still see and we can go to the gallery, we could go to Paula Cooper and still see the work and still enjoy it and still, I've been in residencies where like the artist whose studio is next to me has a book, a catalog of Terry's work. And I'm just like, how do you know it's Terry? Like then somebody who's younger, they never met Terry, yeah, he's been really impactful on my work. And I'm like, wow, that was my professor, that was my mentor, but there's a generation of artists, some younger than me, who are looking at Terry's work, who are getting his catalogs, who are like, his work is so important to me, and so I'm just really grateful for everybody who's carrying his legacy and making sure that it's not just something, that it continues in the importance and as it should.
I can see in the webinar chat here, Annabelle wrote, I didn't get the honor of knowing Terry, but I am the mentee, peer student, and friend of James Morel, who was Terry's student and mentee. The influence that Terry had on James has trickled down to me. I am extremely appreciative to be here for this talk and to be influenced by Terry's teaching, even if not directly. I think that I was so happy when I heard from Matt and Sharon that that Paula Cooper Gallery was handling Terry's estate, because I know with a lot of artists who have intermittent and differing gallery representation during their lifetime and don't have a solid kind of, estate plan going forward because they're really in their prime. I mean, how old was Terry when he passed? He was in his 50s.
I think it was 61, right?
He had just turned 60.
Just turned 60.
Yeah, just turned 60.
Turned 60. Right. So you're at that point in your life and you're not, you're not thinking legacy yet, because you're really, now that I'm 56, like I'm midlife, I'm in the, I'm in the middle of it. So to feel like that work is now, with a gallery that is mounting exhibitions, is organizing it, is bringing the work together and cataloging it and making sure that we have an understanding of all of those materials that were squirreled away in those closets all over campus. I think that's just really, really tremendous. And I hope that folks get up there to see that exhibition, and to, let the gallery know that there is a strong audience for this work, that it continues to have a strong impact. I think that's super important. This event was part of homecoming, and I want to emphasize how critical homecoming is at Penn, and there are different kinds of homecoming, and some of us feel great about coming back at different points in our lives and our careers. I personally don't have a lot of affection for my undergraduate institution, but I do love my graduate institution, Stanford, and I feel very affectionate towards it. And I hope that if Terry's relationship with folks brings them back to Weitzman to see what the students are doing at Weitzman now, I think that would be a beautiful thing. The Arthur Ross Gallery, one of the things that we've been charged with by the Provost's office is to bring the gallery into greater dialogue and collaboration across the university. And so doing this panel is one of those things, but also doing the Master of Fine Arts thesis show in spring is another of them. Looking at shows like Terry's Dark Water show, other shows that were done by Penn Fine Arts faculty over the years. We want to do more of those kinds of exhibitions, highlighting, lifting up the great work that faculty is doing at Penn, but also our MFA students and our alumni. So I hope that folks come back for homecoming, come in person. And I'm just going to put a little plug in there right now for Saturday. On Saturday at the Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts, the Arthur Ross Gallery, the Sachs Program for Arts Innovation, and Penn Live Arts have collaborated to bring a really wonderful painting cycle, an epic painting cycle, 9 panels, 60 feet long, by Nina Chanel Abney to the Annenberg Center. And on Saturday, as a part of homecoming, from 4 to 5 p.m., we'll have a champagne toast. So if you are in Philadelphia and want to come to campus on Saturday, it would be great to see you, to meet you, to say hello, and to help celebrate this piece and continued work here on campus. Sharon, did you want to say a few last words before we close?
I just want to thank you and all the panelists for really raising Terry into the room. Yeah, what a generous gift you've given us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for being here and taking that time. And thanks for everybody for tuning in and adding to the conversation. You are appreciated. Have a good night.